Do you reckon he might be the love interest? Because if he's not, and she describes every male that she sees up until this point, I'm gonna rip my hair out and eat it! As someone who's been steadily getting into the romantasy genre, I was under the impression that this book was supposed to be good. Like so many people, I began my romantic fantasy journey with A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is bad. Really, really, really bad. But it's bad in a uniquely strange way in that it is boring. This is an uneventful, one-dimensional slog. I do not understand people's obsession with this book because it has the audacity to be uninteresting and bland. Then everything turned around for me because I read Feybound, which is really, really fun. It's super similar to A Court of Thorns and Roses, but with genuinely good world building, actual three-dimensional characters, exciting stakes, and a very well-plotted story. Feybound is good romantasy. So okay, great. I now know that this genre has the capacity to be excellent in the hands of good writers. Then I read Fourth Wing, a book that is absolutely dreadful, but in a really unique way. Because it's fun. It is laugh out loud hilarious in its badness. I had so much fun reading Fourth Wing, but not for the reason the author intended. This is a very exciting, very cringe, very hilarious, terrible book. I had fun with it. I laughed from page one. Every single page has a reason for you to laugh out loud. At least I could enjoy how bad this was. It is loud and abrasive and silly and ridiculous. It is better than A Court of Thorns and Roses because at least it's interesting and loud in its badness rather than being bland and a complete uninteresting slog. This thing has audacity and I appreciate that. But I was under the impression that When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker is Fourth Wing if it was actually good. And I am genuinely furious at the fact that that is a bold-faced lie. When the Moon Hatched is abysmal. It is aggressively tragic. I read about 100 pages of this thing before I called it quits. There were a few key reasons why, and we're gonna go through it, but honestly, all I need to do is deep dive into one chapter to really sell you on how awful this thing is and why you should not go anywhere near it. I'll give you one reason right now. This book is so layered with terrible, awful descriptions and details that I know for a fact, even though I didn't finish it, it could have been half the length that it is. Every single page of this book is littered with what the author must be convinced are beautiful and poetic descriptions of the people and places in the environment at any given time. It's awful writing. Exactly like Feybound, which is a good book, When the Moon Hatched opens with a prologue that sets the scene in terms of world building. It begins with a creation myth, establishing the gods of this place, and a little bit of detail about what happened in the early years of the world's creation. You get information about dragons and where they all went and what happened to them, kind of. And right from the get-go, right from page one, you can see how amateur and pretentious the writing is. First was Kalis, god of ether, invisible to the naked eye. The empty space nobody thought about. Where matter formed, he was simply shoved aside. I don't hate that. That's fine. That's a lovely opening line. Where do we go from here? Well, that all comes crashing down straight away. His baritone song was so full of substance, yet lacked it entirely. No, that's not a sentence. And it only gets worse from there. Chapter 1 introduces us to our protagonist, Rave, who is an assassin. Now, to the book's credit, the first few chapters are full of subtle hints at a much larger world. There is no exposition here. There isn't really any world building. We are given names. We are given little bits of information regarding things like politics and religion and lore and history and whatever else. Just a few things sprinkled in. They're not sprinkled in very well because they just give you a headache as you wonder what any of this means because there's no context for any of it. I can appreciate what she's doing, but she fails at it. Just mentioning a character, we don't know who this person is. They are a throwaway mention. We get no background about them. I can understand the desperate need to avoid exposition, but exposition and context are not the same thing. Now, in these opening chapters, she is on a mission to assassinate someone. We don't know who this guy is or what he's done. Once she manages to kill him, we then get all the exposition about who he was and why she was there to kill him in the first place. It is the wrong way round. Again, I understand why she did it. She must have thought that it was a clever approach, but it means that we cannot bond with her and her mission. She is so angry. The word rage is written 10 times on every page for the first 4 chapters. She is an angry woman on a mission. Now, she's been sent to do this, but she obviously feels something so rotten towards this man. We don't know what it is, and then we do, but he's already dead. So the feeling of rage that we should share with her cannot be shared because she kept it from us. Now, we follow her on this mission, and it is so confusing because of how she writes. Every page, every paragraph is bloated with way too much language. She is bloating and expanding every page, wasting our time by giving us so much detail, which means that it kills the pacing. There is no sense of flow or fluidity to the book at all. Every single paragraph is a slog to get through. You need a machete to cut through the vines of every single paragraph as you try to move through the soup of this text. It is so dense in a completely needless way. I was constantly just trying to push through this thing, trying to figure out where I was. You imagine she walks into a room and she spends 5 pages describing every little detail to the point that you forget why she's there. Because the author thought that she was being clever and poetic, and she wasn't. It's offensive. The guy that Rave has been hired to assassinate is called Tarek. And the way that she goes about it in these opening chapters is to seduce him, and he's obviously a creep. And she's trying to lure him out, I think. It's not entirely clear because she doesn't let us into her head, even though we exist in her head, because of course this has to be a present tense first person protagonist narration. Ever since the Hunger Games, there are so many books that insist on being first person and present tense, and it comes off as so juvenile. I cannot stand it anymore. Just listen to this. We're only on page 18 at this point. Tarek Relican stares into the glass he's clutching, swirling an amber liquid, smoke sloshing free. Tangles of red hair hang before his eyes, orange flames barbered into the shorn sides, framing the elemental bead hanging from his lobe like a drip of blood. "You have a sensational voice," he rumbles, stare still drowning in the depths of his drink. "And the colour of your gown." He tilts his head to the side, flames reflecting in his dark brown eyes that singe me from afar. "Exceptional." I ease the door shut behind me, sealing myself in the corridor with the male, mind churning. I've got his attention, now to lure him away from this establishment. It's so much physical detail about the target of an assassination. She tries to make him look attractive. It is misleading and twisted and uneasy. And maybe this is petty. Tell me if this is petty. All the way through this book, gender is divided into males and females. Maybe I spend too much time online, although I really don't think I do. But these days, using male and female as nouns rather than adjectives feels like a conservative dog whistle. The only people you ever see online saying males and females are conservative transphobes. I'm rewatching The Office at the moment, and quite often Dwight, who is a conservative character, refers to women as females because it's objectifying. It makes us all sound like animals, like beasts to be categorized. But if you've got 2 people next to each other who have the same job, they're scientists, and you describe them as the male scientist and the female scientist, that's fine because those are adjectives, that works fine. But if you pointed to the guy and said the male, and pointed to the woman and said the female, you sound like a weirdo. This book does that all the way through, or at least as far as I read. Men are males and women are females, and it is creepy, and I do not appreciate it. It makes my skin crawl. Tell me if you agree, because every single time I read the word male or female, I literally scowled at the book. It's revolting. It's dehumanizing. Page 19. The door behind Tarek swings open and I curse beneath my breath. We both look over his shoulder at the large cloaked male who watched me sing all slumber from the back of the room while exuding the stoicism of a stone statue. Ooh, did you hear that sibilance? Isn't that lovely? Isn't that poetic? No, it's amateurish and silly. And again with the male thing, it's on every single page. Page 20. With a chest full of barely restrained violence flexing for release, I make a straight shot for the exit, certain Tarek will be snapping at my heels with unquenched desires of his own. I've probably only got a few moments to spare while the hooded male relieves himself in the lavatory. Only a few moments to get Tarek out of here without the time-consuming tag-along I didn't account for. The details that we don't need are so cringe and weird. Relieves himself in the lavatory, and the way you read it, because of the alliteration that's used, because of the lengthy words that are paired together, it makes it feel like you're supposed to read it in this slow and seductive way. Because word choices and literary and poetic devices are used in such a way to direct the reader's emotive expression and interpretation as they read. This book feels as though it was intended to be read in this slow, seductive, sexual way, because of all the alliteration and the word choices and the way that the words are paired and constructed within a sentence. And yet you have phrases like relieves himself in the lavatory. What the hell? It feels perverse and strange, and it makes me very uncomfortable. On page 31, here is a paragraph that demonstrates all the issues that I've laid out so far, all wrapped up into one neat package, including the drip feeding of environmental details without context or exposition. I unbutton the overlay on my skirt, rip the top layer from my bodice, and pull the tarnished fabric free, revealing the perfect replica beneath, balling the spoiled layer into a parcel I toss down the rubbish chute that's tunneled into the wall, one of many chutes scattered around the city which delve past ground level, past a few levels of the undercity, and spew out into the lair of a full-grown velvet trog that feasts on Gore's trash. It could so easily be good if she took a breath, if she let me take a breath and digest what is going on. But the book doesn't give you that freedom. It feels anxious. I felt stressed as I read these lengthy paragraphs full of overly complex detail, and the details blend together. You've got the detail of what she's wearing, the detail of the action she's performing to the thing that she's wearing, and the detail of the world beneath her feet that you don't have any context for, all in a single breath across a bloated paragraph. It is anxiety-inducing writing. And here's where I completely lost it on page 33. We are not far into this terrible book yet. All the way through this really, really badly planned out amateur assassination attempt by someone who I suppose is supposed to be a perfect, excellent superstar assassin, there's been a guy in a cloak who has been keeping an eye on her and following her. The guy whose piss she dedicates several sentences to. Well, he's suddenly revealed himself, he's standing on the street opposite her, and this is how he is first described. I look up in time for a blow of wind to push back the hood of the mysterious male from the hungry hollow. My heart plummets, breath loosens. For the first time since Fallon taught me speech, I am lost for words. He's harshly chiseled, raw, fiercely beautiful. My lungs pull full of his scent, so deep and drugging, like smelted stone topped with a ladle of cream. What is that imagery? What does that even mean? I hold the breath hostage, taking him in, admiring his black hair that falls just past his shoulders. It's half pulled back off his face that's partially shadowed by a few loose strands falling to soften his regard. His piercing eyes, the rich molten colour of fired wood. His brows are thick, the lower half of his face shaded by a dark beard that adds a rugged texture to his already robust appearance, like he belongs in one of the renowned warrior clans that took root amongst the Baltanic plains millions of phases ago, wielding an axe and a blood-lusting roar. F*** off! His hood came off, and that's the description we get. Do you reckon he might be the love interest? Because if he's not, and she describes every male that she sees up until this point, I'm gonna rip my hair out and eat it! F this book. It's fucking awful. That is twice in 1 month that I've put my faith in a book I thought I would enjoy. I read a tiny sliver of it before packing it in, and I wasted 20 quid. Sick of this. F this thing. Subscribe for books.